Welcome to the League of Women Voters and the Alliance for the Arts Virtual Candidates Forum. Some of the League's voter service activities include candidate forums and voter guides. This information is made available to the voting public to help in their decision-making process. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that does not support or oppose candidates or political parties. Happy learning.
Welcome to a candidate forum presented by the League of Women Voters of Lee County in conjunction with the Alliance for the Arts. The purpose of these forums is to inform the voting public of the opinions of the candidates running for office. It's not a debate. There will be no crosstalk between the candidates. There won't be any comments from one candidate on another candidate's position. They will be given 2 minutes to open. They will be given 2 minutes to close. They will be given 1 minute to answer each question. The order of answering the questions and opening and closing is random, to be decided at the beginning of the forum itself. So sit back and enjoy. Thank you. Good morning. This is Jim Pelstring, Voter Service Director for the League of Women Voters. And in conjunction with the Alliance for the Arts, we're presenting today a forum with the candidates for the property appraiser's seat. Mr. Matt Caldwell and Mr. Matt Miller are here today. And I should tell you that everyone who is running for that seat was invited to this forum. So with that, I'm going to start by explaining that we have the candidates each give an opening statement, and then we have them each answer the same question. And then at the end, we have them each give a closing statement. And we reverse the order at the end from the opening to the closing so that I don't know how much it helps, but it seems fair. So that's why we do it. So with that in mind, I'll begin today by asking Mr. Miller to give his opening statement.
Hi, thank you. My name is Matt Miller. A little bit about myself. I'm a father, husband, grandfather, Air Force veteran. I am also a longtime resident and property owner in Lee County for the last 30 years. I moved here as soon as I got out of the Air Force and started raising my family in Lee County. This is also where I first started my business with a few $100s and a push mower. I have successfully ran my business for 30 years in Lee County. I'm running for property appraiser for a few reasons. I believe that we need to change we need a big change in our local government and eliminate career politicians. They are bought and paid for by special interests. While in office, I've never taken any, or while running for office, I've never taken any special interest money. I believe that's one of our issues in local government is money. If we eliminate the money from special interest, I think we'll get better people running for office. I don't believe that there's, well, let me start by, I'm not experienced as a property appraiser. I do have experience in running small business and employees. I have experience in managing time, money, and everything else that it could take to run this office. My name is Matt Miller, and I'm running for property appraiser. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Caldwell?
Well, thank you for having us on today. Those of you who don't know me, Matt Caldwell. I have been nearly lifelong resident of Lee County, grew up here, elementary school, all the way through college at Edison and then Florida Gulf Coast. Met my wife there at Florida Gulf Coast. We've been married now for 15 years and have a 12-year-old daughter. Been involved advocating for lower taxes and better government here in Lee County since I was in college. Got involved advocating against Lee County government when they were frankly hoarding $1 billion back in 08-09, and really set me off to run for office. I was elected to the Florida House in 2010, worked a great deal in ag and natural resource policy, but also served on Ways and Means for 6 of my 8 years, which deals with all of the tax policy for the state of Florida. In private practice throughout that whole time, I've been a professional real estate appraiser, appraising first residential homes, then learning commercial appraisal, and ultimately now working on complex assignments, having been approved as an expert witness in state and federal court. I'm proud to have the endorsement of the incumbent, Ken Wilkinson, as he retires. Ken set the bar for property appraisers, not just in this state, but across the country, bringing in innovations in technology and streamlining the office, and then advocating statewide for constitutional amendments like Save Our Homes and portability. It's that legacy that I want to try to build upon, use that experience I have from the legislative time, and bring both my professional and political experience to continue to make this the best office in the state of Florida. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. The first question will start with Mr. Miller. And although you've covered it in your opening, some of these questions will cover what you generally said. The first one is, why are you running for office and what do you hope to accomplish?
Well, I'm a strong believer that private properties should be left alone from taxation. So if we get rid of the politicians that physically spend and work as special interests and not only for the people, I believe we pay more taxes. So to get good people in running for office and actually making a change, I think we need to get rid of the special interest money, so we can actually work for the people instead of special interest. So my whole goal, and I do not believe in property tax, would be eliminate, phase out, and starting with 65 and older, property taxes. My mom pays over 30% of her retirement for property tax. I think they've done their time. They need to retire and enjoy life. And I'm just, again, a strong believer in eliminating as much property tax as possible for the Lee County residents.
Thank you. Mr. Caldwell?
Well, this office, as I pointed out, is really one of the standard bearers for the profession across the state. When you consider the number of parcels Lee County has between just Lehigh Acres and Cape Coral, we're talking hundreds of thousands of lots. Those need to be valued every year. They need to have a correct assessment placed upon them. And really, the person who serves as property appraiser needs to be an advocate for the taxpayer. They're not the tax collector, and they're not the board setting the millage or the tax rate. The property appraiser is the one who represents the taxpayer's interest, making sure that the value set for their property, their home, their business, whatever it may be, is done so professionally and correctly, and ultimately making sure that this office is accountable directly to the people. I'm proud of my history in the past, cutting taxes for seniors, for veterans, et cetera, and certainly want to continue to be that advocate from this role.
Thank you. Mr. Caldwell, what are the most important challenges facing the office that you're running for, and how do you propose to address them?
Well, data collection is always the key point. I mean, you know, the old saying, garbage in, garbage out. And if you don't have good data, if you don't have a good grasp on all of the sales that occur throughout a year, you're not going to have a good valuation process. And, you know, it gets a little bit into the technical weeds, but unlike maybe what a lot of people have experienced, appraiser comes to your house, looks around, takes some pictures, comes up with 3 comps, and sends you the report. The Lee County property appraiser and all property appraisers have to come up with a number for every single property as of January 1st of each year. And that involves tracking all of the sales throughout the county, and then developing a formula, really, a little bit of algebra, to determine how much is each piece worth, the porch, the garage, the bathroom. That's how you develop the final number. And so when you talk about the challenge for this office, just making sure that that data is correct and then verifying it, that's the main task that the staff and the office is focused on throughout each year.
Mr. Miller?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. What are most important challenges facing this office, and how do you propose to address them?
Well, homestead exemptions is the biggest thing that I'm going to tackle when if I'm elected for office. I believe when somebody buys a piece of property, for instance, my house, I paid $250,000 for it. And during the boom, my house was worth almost $1 million. So by them assessing my property 3 times of what I paid for it, they're trying to tax me. Of course, I had the homestead exemption. and I have an agricultural exemption. So they've tried to tax me on a figure that I didn't pay for. I didn't pay $1 million for my house. So why am I paying taxes on $1 million? So again, when it comes back to homestead exemption properties, I believe whatever you pay for your house is what you should be paying taxes on. I shouldn't have somebody come and check in my house every year to see if I did any improvements or if my neighbor paid $2 million for his house and then I needed to do something else. So a fair appraisal for property taxes is what my goal is to do for the people.
Okay. Mr. Miller, how do you plan to operate effectively, efficiently, and economically while continuing to maintain customer service?
Well, I don't think there's an issue with customer service when it comes to the property appraisal's office. I've run a business for 30 years, hired hundreds of employees. I know what a budget is. I know how to work a budget. I believe that I can run it efficiently, as I have for the last 30 years, multiple businesses. And I will just keep working hard to, again, help the people, not the special interest of Lee County, to make sure that their properties are appraised right. And again, I believe that what their property was paid for should be their appraisal as long as they homestead exempt it and live on the property.
Thank you. Mr. Caldwell?
Well, the legacy of this office is pretty spectacular. The incumbent, Ken Wilkinson, will point out that he has slightly fewer employees today than he did when he was first elected in 1980, and it was by embracing technology. For example, you go back to the old days. Somebody bought a piece of property, a deed gets recorded. Somebody would then print that out at the clerk's office. Then it would be taken to another person, the property appraiser's office, and then manually entered each piece of data. All of that's been digitized now, and it happens seamlessly between the two offices. Same thing working with the tax collector to understand what the taxable accounts are. That's the kind of innovation that I want to continue to build upon. Look for ways that we can automate the processes, reduce the number of individual keystrokes, individual inputs, so that the folks working at the office can focus on the main thing that matters: getting the data right, making sure they have the time to evaluate the data, and then focus on customer service rather than backroom activities.
Thank you. Mr. Caldwell, how have you used your education and experience to pursue matters of importance in the public sector and your community?
Well, we can take that a lot of directions. Obviously, my professional background as a real estate appraiser, I think, will be an asset in this public office. But as I talked about in the opening, I got involved politically starting in college. I haven't been shy about speaking my mind, getting involved, advocating for a tighter budget at the county level, being appointed as a volunteer early on with the Lehigh Acres Municipal District to evaluate their budget, make recommendations for where they could cut dollars there. In my service in the legislature, proud of my accomplishments nearly every year in environmental stewardship and also in tax policies. I pointed out 6 years on Ways and Means where we did expand tax breaks for veterans, for seniors, for the disabled. There's a pretty deep well of accomplishments there that I'm proud of, and really only as a result of the support of the folks here in this community.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. How have you used your education and experience to pursue matters of importance in the public sector and your community?
Well, my community I've done business with throughout the last 30 years in employing people. I've donated my time and money to charities. I think that I think I can relate to the people and the taxes to where I'm going to support and work for the people themselves instead of the special interests. So I think I'm well qualified to run for this office and basically represent the people.
Thank you. Mr. Miller, what do you believe are the most important components of a property appraisal?
Well, to appraise the properties correctly, as in, again, I stated this early, of what we paid. I bought a piece of property a few years back for my church, and I got a pretty good deal on it. It was about $40,000. And before the ink was even dry, the property appraiser was there assessing it at almost $500,000, which means my taxes would have been double what they should have been when I actually paid for the property. So my whole thing is transparency. If you pay for a piece of property, I don't think the property appraiser should be right behind you trying to double the value of what you paid for it. So again, I'm going to work for the people, not the special interest, to where I can help the people get what they deserve, and that's the property that they paid for and what they paid for. I'm going to be fair with the people.
Thank you, Mr. Cole.
Well, when you the process of property appraisal, the requirement is that the appraiser be competent and that they be unbiased, and that's been something I've been focusing on, studying on, and practicing in now for 18 years, understanding how to evaluate market data without being biased towards the buyer or the seller, but truly towards what the market is telling you. When you talk about the property appraiser themselves, this office, I mentioned earlier, they are an advocate for the taxpayer. They are not the tax collector who sends you the bill, and they're not the local government that sets the tax rate. The property appraiser is focused on making sure that the valuation is correct, that it's fair, that it's unbiased, and that it is done competently. And I certainly put forward my experience over the last 2 decades as someone who understands how to accomplish that.
Thank you. Mr. Caldwell, what parameters will you use to determine when property values need to be substantially increased or decreased?
Well, those parameters really, that feeds off the last question. It's the market that indicates that. And there are challenges when you have like the Great Recession back in 2008 with a drastic and radical shift in the market conditions. It's much more difficult to capture that, but that's the job ultimately. In the market that we're experiencing now, which is fairly stable with slight growth year over year, you're really just looking to keep the data fresh. You're looking for the newest land sales, the newest home sales, the newest commercial sales, making sure you understand the details behind it. It's not just that it's sold, but what was the relationship? Were the buyer and the seller related, or is it arm's length? You want only arm's length transactions where there wasn't some undue motivation. Somebody was going bankrupt, so they had to sell, or it was their brother or their sister they're selling to. Making sure you have quality data then feeds into a quality valuation, and understanding that distinction, understanding how that works, I think is key to doing a good job in this office.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. What parameters will you use to determine when property values need to be substantially increased or decreased?
Well, on a homeowner side, I don't think they need to drastically change at all. If I pay for something, that's what I should be paying taxes on. If the value goes up or decreases, if it increases like it did back in 2008 to $1 million, I don't think I need to pay taxes on $1 million. I'm going to be fair and balanced, and I'm going to work again for the people, not special interests. I'm going to do the right thing by the people. So if somebody has an argument with their property and it's a valid argument, we're not going to go through magistrates and a bunch of other stuff. We're gonna evaluate the way it should be valued. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Miller, how will you handle requests from developers for reappraisal?
Well, that gets into the commercial side. I don't know too much about the commercial side, but when a developer comes, they actually have to sell the properties too. So it's going to be assessed on the sale of the property. So if a developer comes in and develops 100 acres and he sells, the houses start at 250,000 and go to 300,000, that's what it should be assessed at. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Caldwell?
Well, when it comes to any piece of property, the standard is set by the state of Florida. It should be applied equally in all 67 counties. And property is appraised based upon its highest and best use, whatever that might be. Now, there are exemptions to that. Obviously, you have Save Your Homes and the homestead exemption. We have agricultural classification that values it not at the highest and best use, but at its current use. The same thing for working waterfronts, another constitutional amendment that Ken was able to pass to help keep our local fishermen on their properties. But it's really going to be evaluated regardless of who the owner is. It's going to be evaluated based upon what the market data presents, where it sits in the market, what kind of property it is. If it's a piece of property on a highway with exposure to a major intersection, it's going to be valued as that. And if it's a piece of property out on a rural road in the country, it's going to be valued as that and compared to similar sales that have the same characteristics.
Thank you. Mr. Caldwell, could you please describe your background and experience in real estate?
Thank you. Well, as I mentioned before, I've been a real estate appraiser in private practice since 2002. Started out appraising residential properties, moved in 2003 into the commercial side, and today specialize in really complex assignments, odd properties as you were. We call them the what am I's. If they come across the desk, the zoning may be unclear, the property development potential may be unclear, maybe there's wetlands, maybe there's some older characteristics, site, soil damage, things like that. Those are the ones I specialize in today, as well as litigation support. So providing expert witness testimony in bankruptcy cases, in local cases involving homeowners when government goes to take some portion of land, for example, for a road widening project, testifying on behalf of the homeowners. It's really a broad scope of practice, and I think a good background for this office.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
Can you repeat the question?
Please describe your background and experience in real estate.
My background back in 1991, when I moved to Lee County, I actually was purchasing properties. When I started out, I bought some rentals, and throughout the years, I've bought and sold commercial and residential and lots. So I kind of know where the market is, but when it comes to the property appraisal itself, I haven't been, I don't have any experience, and neither did Ken Wilkinson 40 years ago when he actually started, when he ran for office. So again, I want to be transparent with the office. I want to be able to be a voice and an advocate for the people when they have issues with their property taxes.
Thank you. Mr. Miller, COVID-19, as we all know, has stressed every governmental budget. In general terms, how would you handle a reduced budget in light of expected severe funding shortfalls?
I don't think there is any. Their budget's $9 million. We're not county commissioners, so whatever the county commissioners approve of, which I believe they haven't cut that $9 million. I don't think we have any say so of that money. But if they did cut that budget, I'd be happy to work within that budget, because that's what I do as a small business owner. I work with the means of what we have. Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Caldwell?
Well, a lot of folks may not realize that Florida has a tax certificate program, which ultimately means unless things are drastically headed in the wrong direction like they did in 2008, there are plenty of folks out there that are willing to pay the property tax bill, even if the owner themselves can't afford it, and then earn interest on that tax payment until some future date when the property owner finally is able to pay for it themselves. And so by and large, the local government doesn't see a huge drop in revenue. I think that's important to understand that process. Now, when it comes to operating in an office, I was a strident and outspoken advocate that the county should cut its expenses back during the Great Recession. I got into a pretty public fight with one of the county commissioners over it, but ultimately I think we were right, and the county did trim its budget. The same thing would be true in this office. And as much as we need to live within our means, we will. It's no different than any one of us in our budgets at home or in our business. When you have to tighten the belt, it has to be done.
Thank you. That concludes the questions, and we'll now go to closing statements. And I believe that Mr. Caldwell is giving the first closing statement.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with the voters today to share my ideas, my vision, and my experience when it comes to this office. I believe the 18 years of professional real estate experience that I have will be an absolute asset to this office as I hopefully head in to this position. I think it's one of the biggest reasons that the incumbent, Ken Wilkinson, was eager to endorse us from the very get-go, and certainly look forward potentially to working with him in a transition and try to build, as I said, on that legacy of being a taxpayer advocate, not only holding a high standard for the function of the Lee County Property Appraiser's Office, unbiased, competent, capable, the kind of things we talked about through the forum, but then build on that statewide and continue to be an advocate for tax reform, to continue to find ways to cut taxes, particularly for those that are at the most risk, whether that's our veterans, our seniors, those with disabilities, and ultimately find a way to keep the county, keep Florida the low tax state that it has a well-deserved reputation as being. It's the reason we have 1,000 new people a day moving to the state. You look at Lee County, the direction it's headed over the long term, we're probably near 800,000 people in this census. We're going to head to over 1 million people. It's going to be important that this office be occupied by someone that has the experience and the background to understand the basic appraisal principles and practices, and then have the ability to communicate effectively with a very wide and diverse audience about how important this office is, what it's doing, and how it can continue to be an advocate for the taxpayer.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
Yes, thank you. I want to thank you guys for having us, and I wanted to let you know that as your property appraiser, my main goal would be to protect and preserve the private property rights. That's for all the citizens in Lee County. I will make sure that there's transparency in the office. I will work with local and state level government to eliminate and phase out as much property tax as possible for homestead exempt properties, especially starting with 65 and older. Again, I'm a strong advocate of no property tax for 65 and older. I will eliminate and work hard to eliminate as much possible as the state level would let me to give back their private property rights. Thank you for having me, and God bless.
Thank you. I want to thank both of you for appearing today to shed some light on this office that I guess was held by Mr. Wilkinson for as long as I've lived in Lee County. And it was important, I think, for the voters to hear something about the candidates. This will appear on the League of Women Voters of Lee County website as we taped it today, and it will be on there very soon, I believe. And then traffic will be driven by the Alliance for the Arts website as well. Thank you both, gentlemen.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Thank you.